Hello everyone, very warmly welcome to this event discussing about women's health and that impacts on society, on business, our future possibilities as a country, as a area, region, and of course for businesses. I have here 3 amazing panelists with me, and I hope that you will be a very active audience and also challenge us in the chat. I will try to follow this chat online here and raise up some questions if you have them in that sense. But today we are focusing on the issue is very, very important. It's both a matter of equality and a major economic opportunity, women's health. And here in Turku, we have launched Women's Health Hub Finland, a clear ambition to position Finland as an international leader in women's health research, innovation and business. And this is not only about better healthcare for women. It's about competitiveness, it's about resilience, it's about building a more sustainable Europe and more equal Europe. And why does it matter? Because Europe is undergoing rapid demographic change, new health challenges are emerging, and societies are under pressure to remain both competitive and cohesive. Prioritizing women's health is not only the right thing to do, it's a smart investment in the well-being and productivity of our societies. And to illustrate you what is the gap at the moment, only around 1% of global health innovation budgets are dedicated to women's health, even though women make up more than half of the population. That is the gap we need to close. And that's what we are going to discuss here today. And I'm really delighted to welcome our distinguished panelist, Nina Ekholm-Wennberg. She's a chair of Pharma Industry Finland and Johnson & Johnson country director, bringing an industry-wide and ecosystem view. She's also having a long experience on the international pharma leadership, over a decade in this role, and made history this January as the first J&J representative to chair pharma industry in Finland. Am I correct?
You are spot on.
And signaling her commitment boosting Finland's innovation profile. Very warmly welcome.
Thank you very
happy
much.
that you're here. Tomi Penttilä, Managing Director, CEO of Bayer Suomi. Of course, also of the Turku site here in Turku, bringing a company level and innovation pipeline perspective. Tomi has been with Bayer Finland over 10 years and leads operations that export medicine globally. And Turku facilities even dubbed the contraception capital of the world due to its more than €1 billion success. Mm-hmm. And a really interesting perspective to this discussion is coming from Ville Niinistö, very experienced politician, both nationally and European level, member of the European Parliament, bringing the policy and EU framework perspective to this discussion. And that's also a very, very important aspect. This is the area where we are talking about is very regulated, and there is many kind of aspects to this discussion, and competitiveness of Europe is also one of those aspects. Ville is, of course, Turku born, or at least local born politician here in the region, very familiar, and a track of record of principled leadership, resigning and as environment minister, having been steering lately the EU's this, now I forgot the word, you are working with the Russian delegation to defend human rights, and that's very important also aspect. So we have kind of 2 main topics we are discussing about, and we start how we will close this gap. So our question is from gap to solutions, and what gender-specific solution maybe your company like Bayer is already offering, or the industry is having there. Where do we see the biggest gap at the moment where we need to be addressing it, and how can the research organization, companies and the policy framework together work to close this gap? So I'm first addressing to Nina, bringing the sector-wide and ecosystem perspective. So from that perspective, what are Finnish pharma companies currently making progress in women's health? And where do you see the most pressing gaps? And also maybe if you want to share your views on how can partnerships with academic research and EU-funding projects accelerate time to market for women-specific innovations?
Wow, that was a quite big question to kick it off.
Maybe we are closing the gap.
It's good. And maybe overall, I think Finland, if I start with that one, is like a possibility to be a pioneer here. Usually Finland has been a pioneer when it comes to equality matters generally. Talk about like voting rights, talking about universal daycare that I actually had here in Turku as well. So I have a little bit connection with Turku, or education. My mom was here in the university. I think when it comes to health, we also would need to secure that we have equal access to health. And it's not the case worldwide, it's not the case in Finland either. And when you talk about women's health all in all, I think it's both under-researched, it's underdiagnosed, it's also undertreated and underfunded. Like not all medications are, for example, reimbursed in Finland for really normal, but more or less every woman go through their stages of life. So I think it's not incentivized. Like in pharmaceuticals, we have good examples when you have incentivized, for example, pediatric research or rare diseases. So why don't do it here? And it should be done because €1 that you invest brings back €3. There's a lot of studies on this. So there's a lot of things we can do. But it needs to be incentivized. I think Tommy here will bring forward, but Bayer does some excellent work here in Turku and like being the capital of women's health, Turku worldwide, you could say. It's a fantastic example. We do a lot of clinical research in the medicinal space. Also my company represents do that, also in Finland. I think it needs to be further incentivized, this kind of clinical research in women's health. We need to also be better in the funding part, because in Finland currently it's 50% of new innovations don't come to Finnish patients' access. They don't get them in the treatment, and there's multiple reasons for that. We are the 16th country in Europe to get our medications, so there's 15 that gets prior to us. When you look at access to medicine, for example, Finland, it's an average of 444 days, so 25% longer it takes to Finland to get medicines versus Denmark, versus Sweden. They are around 300. So these are things we need to do together. But I'm sure you have a good examples, for example, from Bayer, what you're doing in women's health currently and how you are progressing there.
Yeah, so we can continue to Tommy and company level and innovation pipeline to you. From your industry, or actually now coming to the Bayer's perspective, where are Finnish and European pharma companies currently making progress, specifically in women's health? And where do you see the most pressing gaps? And how do you see the advantage of cooperating with smaller companies, maybe research institutions, and being a member of initiative like Women's Health Hub Finland?
Yeah, thanks Minna. Yeah, Bayer is well positioned in women's health and has a long tradition and long-term commitment also to women's health and one of the global leaders, obviously. In Finland, we already mentioned that we are very known from the contraception, but we also have, as company, also from the first periods all the way to the menopause solutions. But even in the contraception that we are very famous for and distribute to over 130 countries, there is still 250 million women who would want to have access but don't have access to modern contraception. So the unmet need is enormous in this space. If you look at the menopause as an example, there are projected to have like 1.2 billion women who is suffering from the symptoms and are not really getting like a good enough support for that. And roughly 50 million women every year coming more into that age, having the menopause symptoms. So that has a significant effects also on the on the society, that what it brings then with that the women are suffering doing the work when that's active and also the economic stability might be at risk then if really the symptoms hit hard. So there is also a lot of opportunities still to go after and have a research and good products to help women in that. So there is a lot of unmet need, even though we are one of the global leaders in this space.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite interesting. I think that also to understand that it's a lot of unmet need here in developed countries, but also on the other hand, if we are talking about developing countries, and those are a little bit different, but still it's not only the problem with developing countries, it's also here as talking about menopause, for instance. Yeah. Okay, Ville, now we're going to the EU level and policy frameworks. So if you think about policy-making standpoint and how well is the EU's current health research and funding ecosystem addressing this maybe innovation system as such, but also if you think about specifically now while we're talking about women's health, and what policy levels should and could strengthen about this cross-border collaboration and ensuring that these innovations will be done here in Europe and scaled also here in Europe?
Okay, to start with, I'm very happy that I was invited to this event, and maybe if I may start from a bit of a more personal background, because in the last few years, me and my wife, we have gone through a long period of fertility treatment and wanting to have a child. In the end, we got our son Kasper 2 years ago. But those 3 years that we were going through that process, I realized a lot of things that I had. It's kind of like the invisible area that, if men would give birth to children, that healthcare system would look totally different. It would be a lot better because these are kind of like these very quiet, not talked about issues about how badly we have researched miscarriages, for example, that there are treatments for miscarriages, but we don't have systemic health for women who have multiple miscarriages. So the healthcare system in itself does not recognize women's specific issues so well as it could. So when I kind of like this eye-opening experience, we've gone through it, and there have been multiple points where I have realized that if kind of like getting children is one of the most important things in a society, both at the personal level, but also for us as a country with so low fertility numbers, that how little we are investing in supporting that research and at women's health. It's actually quite shameful. And then I've gone through, after this experience, what we do at the EU level. And it's true that only 1% of EU funding goes to gender-related health research for women. And if we look at clinical trials, majority of them, almost all of them are done, trials are done on young men, because on trials it's been felt that, if there are hormonal cycles, you can't use women as in the trials. But that means that all medicines are made for men, not for women. And women still use them. So it would be maybe good to know that what kind of effects these medicines have on women. So that means that this gender-specific funding has to be increased a lot. So we have to have more focus on the European level on that. So that's something that when we look at the innovation system, I think we really have to work more on women-specific health issues, because they are so important for sexual rights, reproduction rights, and also for fertility. So we have to do that. They are one of the most important things in our society. But also prevention of different, like cancer is something where EU invests a lot, but there should be also more funding on women-specific cancer research and prevention. So this is something that the EU level has been woken up to. And I think the current president of Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is very interested in this topic. So she has put a focus on it. But, big giant machines move slowly and change direction slowly. So I would say that we have a lot to do also in how we process the trials and how the medicines get licenses and all that. So we should do more cooperation at the European level. The European Medical Agency should do more. We should have a European domestic market, so a single market. So it should be more clear that we have processes that are applicable all around Europe. So there are a lot of differences in the member states still, how these things work and how also women-specific health issues are addressed. So this is, I think, this very, very timely debate, and it's good to have it here in Turku, because we have a lot of industrial investments in Turku on women-specific health issues for Bayer, but also other research.
So actually we should have a women's health hub Europe.
Yeah.
And not only like Finland, and then we have to scale it up and find the kind of ways to how focus on that. But coming to that, so I will ask you one more question. What comes to the proposal of the Commission was now giving about the next European budget, and there was this idea about the new competitiveness fund, where actually health issues would be aligned with the same group with agriculture and bio kind of related issues. So how do you see, will there be anything else than agriculture in the end of the day if that would be aligned in the same kind of funding possibilities? How we will make sure that that will be dedicated also for the health and especially for women's health?
Well, I think women's health should be one of the things that we should mainstream in all funding, because the EU has different health funding. So we have the Horizon Europe program that has health research, and then we have more health-specific programs, EU for Health and these programs. So we should have specific targets on women's specific research in all of those branches. And when it comes to the next framework program of EU, we are talking at the, at the 1,000 billion euros. So it's a big sack of money, and at this stage, when we are talking about which labels go on which pots of money, it's still very kind of like uncertain how effective that will be, and how much focus on quality will there be. So my main worry is with the Commission's proposal that they want to change EU funding structure into such that it looks like that they are spending a lot on competition, the competitiveness. So competitiveness funds gets a lot of money, but more important than that, what is counted as competitiveness spending is how we spend money and how much it's going to be based on quality and how much it will better the quality of life. So I think health research is very much has to be about qualitative spending of money. So the projects has to be the best in Europe, and it should not be based on kind of like supporting, regional cohesion policies, for example.
Yeah, so we are now in the very next coming months, or at least year and a half or so, will be very important part of that, how the budget of the next European fund period will be actually finalizing, and what are the emphasizing focus areas there.
If I'm just saying this shortly, the risk may be that we are not spending money on making EU pharma industry and health research the best in the world, but we are actually spending money on those who do worse in Europe to get more subsidies, and then those who actually have qualitative research and industries are not competitive in comparison with China or US. So we should look at the global level and not just between ourselves.
Yes, and of course funding is very important in that there, but what other things, actually Nina, I would ask to you about these EU level policies and innovation policy, for instance, how pharma industry sees that is it supporting that kind of innovation and long-term pharma development, what is at the moment the needs anyway?
I think it's clear that the change is needed, and I think we need to be bold in that change. And I was so curious listening also to you, Ville, and I think you have a good path on where you bring forward and so to say. But I'm still hearing this kind of funding and the cost part of all of this, and how we share the cost of things. And I would really want to change totally the debate. It's when you talk about health, health is important for me, it's important for you, for all of us here, and healthy people brings the healthy society. And it's an investment, because that's also when I have my discussions, it's always seen like a cost post, for example, of the Ministry of Health, or somewhere where you can save money. When again, you should think that here in the women's health, it's €1 to gives you 3, and the same if you invest in health in all things, you invest in the security, you actually bring this kind of value-based healthcare that we talk about, that you actually had a better outcome. It's like a multiple effect, and it's an investment. It's something that helps Finland grow. The much needed grow. It's something that helps Europe grow. And I think there are quite many, so to say, tangible actions we still would need to do to really shift that mind shift and the paradigm from cost of medicines to its investment in health, that is actually bringing the economic growth from that perspective.
So how do these investments would pay off economically and socially?
I think, we have studies showing, for example, if you get a clinical study into a country, so to say for the patient benefit, it's 1.5 million, and the so to say societal benefit, it's more than 10 million. So that's like clear investments per se. In order for like big pharmaceutical companies to make investments, or for the Finland ecosystem, like the Finnish biotechs or pharmaceuticals to strive, they need to have some supports, and see that there's like I want to also support and see these innovations then as a solution in the economic growth going forward. So securing that also the patients then in Finland, or we talked about other parts of Europe where they have, so to say, even further less access to medicines, would get that medicines. But I think we have quite a lot of things to do still in Finland, as we only get 50% of innovations here. So I think it's not only the clinical investment, clinical study investments, or these kind of ecosystems like we have here, like Turku brought forward very, very good. But it's also like really seeing that a healthy person, a person who gets their medications, who get right diagnosis, right treatment early enough, innovation access, will actually bring so much more to society. We see that from multiple perspectives. And women's health is one thing. Women also have more than double the amount of depression through their life. They also have much more, I think it's up to 25% more sick leaves. And that's like, the economical impact that we always tend to forget, that if those 25%, if you could have the same amount of depression with women as men, or even less for both, what kind of actual economical impact positively that would have, that would anyway, like any time, weigh off the costs of the actual medicines.
Yeah, that's a very important thing also, thinking about the data that we actually need when we are trying to convince, for instance, policymakers or decision makers for that funding and otherwise the policy frameworks. And this sick leave thing is one thing I've been really thinking about what comes to, for instance, menopause, which is not very well recognized in Finland. We don't have any this hoitosuositus.
This kind of treatment guidelines.
Treatment guidelines, which is actually at the moment the government is doing those, which is very good. Yeah. And that's where you actually get in those sick leaves where you don't get even solution for your health problems, you don't find the right medication or right kind of solutions, and still the whole society is lacking the impact on your work load. But Tomi, coming to thinking about your role and how do you see the role of Finland could be here in shaping this kind of EU-wide strategies, trying to convince why we should invest more and try to find this innovation base for the women's health specifically, and how that innovations translate into these kind of economic values for companies.
Yeah, thanks. We seem to be very like-minded, so easy to sign everything you have said. But bringing another perspective is that I think the health like business is very big already in Europe. It's like a massive industry in Finland. It's growing also rapidly, and we start to see even the Bayer portfolio alone is selling globally almost 3 billion last year, and the first half was even higher than that. So it starts to be significant money, but not only the products that we sell globally, that means that we can also like innovate them in Finland, we can manufacture them in Finland, and I think we'll have what it takes in the medical space to actually be the country who can be the best in producing these very high value products with a lot of automation. And then if I'll just give you numbers that are real from our company, so we have now invested to Finland roughly 1 billion in the past 10 years. It's quite a significant amount. It includes the clinical trial unit, more research side. Also, we'll have an early research center, but then also the manufacturing and the big investments on that. And then if we look the products that we sell then globally, that what else they bring to Finland is that we have paid also over 1 billion in corporate tax alone in the same time horizon in 10 years. So also money comes back to the society then to fund other well-being activities in the country. So that business can really be something that Finland can be proud of and can help our country creating jobs, but also taxes and then also this innovation space. But to your question, what it takes to repeat this kind of success in the future, so Europe has to be competitive. we can't be competitive in Finland if the Europe is not competitive. So let's start with that. Europe has to be competitive. I think Europe has to be innovation friendly. We will need to be a continent where we value the innovation so that the companies who want to innovate have enough motivation to do so in this region so that they don't start moving away the innovation part to other continents. And then when Europe becomes competitive, then also Finland can become competitive, but it doesn't come automatically.
No.
So we'll need to then also work hard to make it competitive. And I didn't answer, Minna, your earlier question on the relevance of this kind of collaboration, like what we are with the Women's Health Hub creating, is that we'll need many players. It's not only the big companies like Bayer who we need. We need also the small ones and the researchers and the crazy ideas someone is coming up with. And then with those ideas, we'll need to also find ways to help them through the death of valley that typically is in the pharma industry, so that they become to the level that they can really start getting the products to these clinical trials and others, so that in the end the patient would get the product. So I think there is a lot of things to do, but I think we are well positioned in Finland to be very successful also in the future, and our history tells us that we have been successful so far. So.
And maybe one thing, if I can just comment, that the pharma industry, like taking in consideration all these things that also need to change in our environment to secure earlier access to innovations for Finnish patients, then 50% should also be included, so it should be closer to 100% access. We also made a value promise that we even submitted this spring to the Ministry of Finance, that if we, so to say, get a better environment in Finland, then we will also double more or less our investment, which include Bayer's investment. Now we are talking about annually 500 million direct investments, but then also it's naturally broader. But then within a few years' time, we could even double up that. And I think we can take a lot of examples from Sweden. I've been working there 5.5 years before, and Denmark as well, where they really see pharmaceuticals and health tech like part of the industry policy and are investing in this one. And then they get a lot of, so to say, investments back to the company and country, and then with that grow. And Finland needs that growth. And I would be a bit curious to understand, Ville, because you are, so to say, so interconnected in Europe, that is there any other good examples that you see that Finland particularly could benefit from the rest of Europe?
Well, my question to you already, because that was more or less the same, so we can continue. Please comment your other reflections to the other comments. So it would be really interesting in that way also, so we can.
So the question was.
So my question was about this, how this kind of. Now I forget.
My question was more that what can Finland take as a learning from rest of Europe? Or any other country?
So I can a little bit later.
Well, if I may react also to what was said earlier, since we are here in Turku, it's also good to understand, because in Finland we often speak about forest industry and the role of bioeconomy, but in Turku, pharmaceutical industry is a lot bigger than forest industry. Forest industry is not so big industry here in southwestern Finland. The rest of the Finland, it's big, but for us it's important to remember that this is big for us. So and it's big for whole of Finland, but the amount how little it's been talked about in Finnish politics as a national interest to support pharmaceutical industry and its innovations in Finland, it's remarkably low, the level of commitment from politicians. So I think it's in our region, we should do it nationally. And I think this is one thing we could learn from the rest of Europe. Yeah. If you talk with the Germans or the Danes, they talk about pharmaceutical industry all the time, the politicians. In Finland, politicians don't see this as a politically interesting area, which is a bit weird, because we have a lot of knowledge in this area. So there's something, it has become unpolitical in Finland. It's seen as more of an expert issue, which has its benefits. So politicians don't mess things up, but we don't get all the funding we could get for increasing the innovation, and it doesn't have if you look at the public spending on pharmaceutical research and medicine research in the last 20 years in Finland, it has gone down. Quite a lot actually. So we have been world leaders in many research areas like cancer research, but we are losing ground. So we should invest more as a public research and innovation in this area. But also what you mentioned, we should look at how we can, with public policies more broadly, and then maybe innovation funding, that can stimulate private investment. So how we can make private money into this area increase in Finland with public support. That discussion is not so large in Finland, and I know that in Denmark and in Germany it's a big issue. And in Denmark, I mean, Novo Nordisk is there, Nokia currently. I mean, it has risks that you have one big company, but they know that this is a strategic interest for them. But in Finland, this focus from politics and support from politics has been lacking. So I think also another issue I wanted to kind of like reflect on, which I have to say aloud as well, because this is often the only conflict I have with pharmaceutical companies, and that comes on the discussion of consumer prices on medicines versus support to innovation. So I'm just saying this publicly to you as well, that there's sometimes conflict because in EU decision making we also made to make sure that people have money to pay for their medicines. So there is a bit of a uneasy balance where you have to have a good balance that those companies who invest in new medicine get patents that support the production long enough to pay for that investment. But then we get substitute medicines for a lower price later on at some stage. What is the good time for that, and how the patents take into consideration also like development aid and how the poorest people in the world get medicine for a lower prices. This is a kind of like this, how you solve this is still unresolved. And my answer to this is that we have to find a common ground with the industry, because we want the industry to grow in Europe. We want that research to happen in Europe. So we have to have a good environment for them to do those investments. But then we also expect from you to say how you think that we can lower the prices also in Europe, but then also in the rest of the world where the poorest people in the world live.
Maybe just one comment to that. So, I mean, like generally, pharmaceuticals, life is about 20 years, so to say, when from the study. So it takes some 10 years before it comes to the market, and then it's like 1 out of 10 who gets access. And then we talked that 50% of those who get access don't even come to Finland. Yeah. So it's quite a long run. And then within, so to say, 20 years or 10 years from coming potentially to the market, then the patent usually goes off. And I think it's like a system that works quite well. Because then you again can afford new innovations when those goes off patent and the price goes down. And it's important that this is transparent and that there is a clear, so to say, how you get access. And I think that's something we struggle with in Finland to some parts currently, to get equal access to all. I think in general with the pharmaceuticals, we have a high risk. Like 1 of 10 go out. We are one of those who put the most into research and development, like quite big amounts. And I think globally, Europe get their fair share of 50 billion, I think, annually. It could be much bigger for Europe, and for Finland, certainly much bigger than we currently get. So there's a lot of things to gain from there. And I just want to say that when you talk about the price for patients, so prescription medicine, and when you get the funding, so even if it's the Hila-Kela channel or then even in the hospital channel, it's evaluated and it's seen that it needs to be a fair price and it's, so to say, reasonable price setting. So it's quite clear on those measurements, and it's re-evaluated multiple times as well. So just to be clear.
I think we are a little bit here kind of in the heart of the discussion about Europe's competitiveness also. I think also Tomi was reflecting to that we should be, as in Europe, very competitive also, that the companies can and have a possibility to innovate and use a lot of investments and resources to that. And at the same time, there is we see that the Commission, for instance, and Europe has not been maybe the most competitive, hungry area in the world. And now we are seeing this global trade war, nearly one could say, what's happening in US, tariffs and all kind of protectionism coming up. So kind of reflections also to that would be nice to hear from you, Ville, and then coming back to this Finland perspective. And while kind of most of the pharma industry is located here and the research is a lot of located here in Turku region, and as you mentioned, I agree that it's not that recognized in the decision makers in national level, this whole industry. So what could we do there? How did you see then while you were in the government at time? How would you now have the possibility to guide a little bit the current government or the future coming governments, how this could be taken more seriously?
Well, I think the big problem is that in Finland, Ministry of Economy, so So the one running the Ministry of, what do you call it, in the Työ- ja elinkeinoministeriö. Työ- ja elinkeinoministeriö is the ministry in EU language we would call it economy. It's not the finance ministry. So Ministry of Economy is focused very much on these like Finland has been big in business to business big machines. So I think the ministry in how it sees what are interesting industries is still very much about steel and metal and mining and forestry, but things that use a lot of resources. And I think these kind of like smart high-end products that are more focused on results of research like medicines and pharmaceutical research get in general too little attention in Finland. And it's weird because that's the high end of added value. So I think we should move the focus of pharmaceutical industry being something that the Ministry for Social Affairs and Health is handling into something that the Ministry's economy is promoting.
Agreed.
That's the change that we need to have. But then that promotion should also have these values like women's health. That we do not promote it as in an old-fashioned way, but we also see that the progressive spending there. So I think that's what needs to be done. And from the EU level, you can see that we could be more coherent on this. Then you had another question.
Well, it was about the global situation and how we kind of frame ourselves in competitive way for innovations and this kind of
because what I said about is the challenge in Finland, that's actually the broader European challenge. So where the investments and innovation goes. And during Trump, now I would be also very keen to hear how you see this, because I mean, we have a lot of medical industries in Europe, but they are very worried about not spending in investments into Europe if they don't know that Europe is good for innovation, but also if the markets elsewhere are not accessible. So we come to the question if there are high tariffs from the US, like also your products are sold in a quite high share of those are sold to the US market. So how we can also promote that we have a global fair trade and free market access for European products elsewhere. I think this is a big, we should prioritize pharmaceutical industries in our trade policy at the EU level. I think that's something we should really do, that we don't get high tariffs, because Trump has said that he has even like a long-term goal of having 250% tariffs on pharmaceuticals specifically, because he wants to increase medical production in the US. But I think that would be very harmful both for Europe, but also for the American consumers if he would go for that. So I think EU trade policy should also promote the pharmaceutical focus a lot more.
I saw the ball coming to the Tommy about this for a European level innovation policy kind of changes, and maybe if you shortly comment on those, and then I would like to hear every one of you one concrete step that we would do now, specifically coming to the women's health and how to promote the kind of innovation women's health hub Finland, scaling it up to the European level, and maybe wishes to the policymakers. But Tommy, please.
Yeah. Obviously, the pharma pricing that you touched a little bit is also one hot topic in the global conversation, especially with the Western world now, and their EU needs to also understand that how the EU operates. That if one country will have a free trade, so one country can even destroy a lot. So the pharma pricing is a hot topic, of course. All trade barriers is not helping. They are steering the world like artificially into some direction. Making pharma products is not like something that happens in one country anyhow. So it's a very global supply chain to overall be able to make any product. So that's an important one. And then the third aspect we already touched is that how innovative friendly we are in the bureaucracy, in the all the like these patent times and everything. So they are really big questions that we'll have at hand. So not touching any of those more than that, but very, very important points to discuss. If I start the commitments to the Women's Health Hub, so obviously Bayer was part of ramping it up together and collecting also the companies to do it. We'll have our long history in it, and we want to wake up more people to join the party. So of course our biggest thing we can now do is just to talk about it and invite everyone to research on the space. But then specifically the menopause is something that we are working currently, and we would like to talk about that more. Even you will start with the personal story, so I can also admit that I didn't get in the school any knowledge on the menopause. And I'm afraid that that's the case for every single man and every single woman in Finnish school system in the 80s, that it was just not mentioned in any books. Or then I haven't read the books well enough. So it is a topic that hasn't been really talked about. And now working in this industry and understanding that what it is and then what are all the symptoms and things, I'm like, why we haven't discussed this more? That we'll need to start discussing this more now. So that's another commitment, that we want to start talking more about the menopause and creating solutions for women to get help for that.
Great.
Nina.
Yes, maybe from my perspective, I think it's we have a lot of information now. We would need to make actions. We also have a lot of insights, and here was also the topic about making the impact. I think from those perspectives, we should learn from previous examples. We have, for example, the cancer strategy, European-wise, then also now we are rebuilding it in Finland this time. Then something actual tangible happens. The same we should do for women's health in Finland. Another example is, like I brought forward earlier as well, is this, like with rare diseases, where you get patent protection or longer patents, or you get incentivized for, or the same, like, so to say, with pediatric indications, that has also been under, so to say, before. So those could also be concrete actions for the pharmaceutical industry globally, and for Europe and for Finland to support that. Then it's incentivized to really do much more studies in women's health. And I've been working a long time in cancer and breast cancer and with precision medicine. And when I, being a woman myself, I mean, it's precision medicine at its core. And like you said, most studies are done then for a wider population, that is maybe not precision medicine for women. So we should be doing that more, but getting incentivized for it and making those actions, making that impact we need now. And all studies also show it brings us economic growth. It means the equality that we need, and it's important that we do it. And it impacts menopause, depression, cancer. It's multiple diseases that are women-specific. But more investment in health. See it as an industry policy, you and I already agreed upon that. That's where it needs to go.
Thank you. So, Willen, now you can close the gap by giving your next concrete kind of commitment and also guidance to how to impact to the policymakers in EU level.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed that usually when there is a women-specific topic on health, it's mainly women who speak. So I'm already happy that there are two men here also talking about this. And the one commitment I'm making is that as a man, I continue to talk about these issues, because that's kind of, it's important that we don't leave it only for women to, break the ceiling on that topic, and that applies to treatment of fertility issues or miscarriages. What I've been trying to raise with our personal background with my wife, I'm continuing to do that, but I will also continue to work with more gender-focused work on EU level and globally. And as a final point, I don't want to kind of make you all more sad, but also there is a kind of conservative counterattack against women's rights globally. And what President Trump is doing in destroying USAID, there is actually millions of contraception medicine that USAID has in its storages, and the government in US has a plan to destroy them all and not use them because they are putting down the funding, so they destroy the medicine, and that would be millions of people in poorer countries who don't get contraception. So what I promise to do is to raise the political profile on these issues, that it's important that we as men, also progressive men, fight for the right of women in Finland, in Europe, but also globally, to have their sexual and reproductive rights being recognized.
Thank you. And you also answered the one audience question, which was actually about this women's right, how to say, not movement forward, but going backwards in the globally. But I also kind of sense that coming back to the industry, there is no afraid of that they would be kind of lacking their motivation or getting their investments down because of this kind of trend at the moment in some countries, but more or less to go forward. And I really want to thank you, Ville and Tommy, also being strong advocate for women's health, because I agree that it needs men's voice as well. It can't be just a women's thing, women talking to women. And of course we can do that, but still it needs also strong voices from all of us. And just to now closing down this good, really interesting discussion, I want to thank you for the panelists, audience question, and shortly summarize that coming here from the discussion is that investments in the women's health is investment in the economic growth, is investment to equality. At the same time, we see that there is more than half of the population globally is women, and there is a huge unmet need in women's health, and also very much regarded kind of lack of regarding what is the main point why this is done. And my personal view for this women's health issue is actually menopause. I was suffering 3 months for sleeplessness and not understanding what it was. And I didn't even go to my doctor because I just thought that I was stressed of the work or whatever. Just, well, you take it as you take it, like a woman and so on. And then understanding that there is a medication which is helping, and this is about menopause. And these are the things also that it's not only that men don't recognize, but we as a women, we don't recognize. So it's a good closing here that thank you for the discussion. This is about economic growth, equality, investments in health and innovations and competitiveness for Europe. And I also heard a commitment from Nina's side that she will start working with the strategy for women's health in Finland with us. Thank you very much. Let's give a big applause to our panelists.